Welcome to part 2 of this presentation on Bowen's family systems theory. My name is Nathan Villasenor, representing the University of Western States. Last time we finished up taking a look at the 8 concepts that were developed by Bowen as patterns that he noticed among whole families that he was studying. So now we jump into the therapeutic applications of his theory. And the big question is, how do we use this approach? To begin with, we have to take a look at the process. This approach is less a treatment-focused therapy and more of a process-focused therapy. We aim to help the patient recognize when there might be patterns of poor differentiation and encourage them to confront these issues long-term. The relationship between the therapist and the patients here is very important and kind of unique as well. We only act as calm mediators for the patients to reflect with. We do our best not to assign blame. We model for the patients what differentiation looks like and how they can most easily reach it with their family as support. We try not to create a dependency on us, and so when possible, we try to remove ourselves from the unit of the family. We want to make sure that the patients and the family unit itself can function long after therapy has ceased. And finally, the goal. The goal is that the patient should emerge from therapy confident and emotionally mature, capable of perceiving patterns and managing threats before they become long-term issues. Because of the way that we orient ourselves around identifying psychopathology, that it's a human problem and not something that is related to mental illness per se, it becomes very manageable. It becomes something that they can tame, and they can recognize the symptoms of it long before it turns into an ongoing issue. And therefore, they can work themselves to do anything that they can to relieve those tensions and to engage in the activities that we've provided for them so that they can best modify their relationship with their family unit and act within it. Some special considerations kind of fall into 3 different areas here. So the first is practicalities. This kind of therapy has been proven to be very useful in patients that suffer from pathological anxiety and marital satisfaction issues. There's also issues of psychological distress that might be available to be treated with this kind of therapy, and it might also help to reduce risk-taking behaviors and parenting outcomes. When considering multicultural factors, this orientation is a little bit more individualistic rather than collectivistic. So for individualistic type therapies, it's actually oriented such that the person who you are treating is encouraged to have autonomy and control over their family unit and over themselves within that unit. They're able to see themselves as a function of the unit and understand that changes within themselves or other individuals in the unit might affect the greater family unit as a whole. Collectivistic cultures might have issues when dealing with this kind of orientation, and the reason is that they don't necessarily prioritize their own needs or their own emotions when considering problems that they want to address. Further, this orientation is focused more on psychologically minded cultures, so the cultures that might also benefit from psychoanalysis, those kinds of abstract thinking focused cultures, often, again, individualistic and Western. And as well, it's oriented towards cultures that value ambiguity. Therefore, cultures that rely on authority and discrete direction in order to best engage in a task might have issues with this kind of therapy. The reason being that it's kind of self-guided. The therapist goes out of their way to encourage the patient to investigate their own family unit and find out where the anxieties are and recognize their own patterns, rather than being told directly what they are and what needs to change. And finally, there's some critique about Bowen's family systems theory. The first has to do with gender roles. This theory kind of orients itself in favor of the patriarchal unit of family rather than something where, let's say, we have two lesbian mothers, or a single mother household. There almost always seems to be some kind of a factor of a male role in here, and the theory seems to re-ingrain gender roles wherein the man might be less emotional or the woman might be more emotional, or something like the man might be more connected with his own son rather than his own daughter. The other thing is that the therapist actively tries to remove himself from the family unit so that they are not part of the pattern that's being recognized by the patients. And what this does sometimes can discount the therapist's role in the family unit. The reality is that the therapist is even involved in the family's situation, integrates them into the family's unit, even for a short amount of time, and what the therapist says and does might have an effect on the family. Another critique is that this kind of therapy is, again, more focused on rationalism, thinking your way through things, and it might discount the effect and importance of emotional literacy. And so when individuals are asked to discount their own emotions and asked to ignore them and asked to recognize that there might be just a logical pattern to one individual's actions and another's reactions, again, it seems like those emotions are dwarfed and not considered as important. A final critique is that it focuses on goal imposition, and so sometimes the therapist might impose goals on the patients that are not necessarily the best for the patient, but rather what works best for the theory. And so rather than being kind of like a client-oriented approach, it might turn into something that has a bit more of a, well, this is what should be done, this is what the book says, and these are the goals that you need to pursue. And sometimes families might be comfortable only reaching a specific point of healing and not going all the way, and that's okay. That's their own family to be okay with. Really, again, the goal of this all is to be differentiated between interpersonal and intrapersonal goals. And if the family's comfortable where they are, then that's really all the therapist needs to stop at. So we can apply everything that we've learned to an example case study that I've prepared for us. And this is the case of the M family. Mr. M has presented with his family for therapy, reporting loss of intimacy with his wife. They've been married for 9 years, and he recently turned 35, which is the same age that his father was when he died abruptly. His wife is 39 and runs a successful interior design business, while Mr. M works as a science teacher at his children's elementary school. Mr. M reports spending most of his time at home focusing on helping his son with soccer practice, and claims that while his daughter is closer with their mother in general, he expresses no tension with her and regularly participates in her talent for painting. Mr. M and his wife have experienced a growing tension from seemingly out of nowhere, and recently have stopped eating meals together. He sleeps on the couch downstairs. While they seem to no longer engage in intimate moments, he's expressed concern that he could one day lose everything in an instant and does not wish to continue down this path with his wife. Now, if we take some of Bowen's tenets and apply them to the M family, we see a few different patterns here. The first being that there is some kind of triangulation here between Mr. M and his wife and his son. Because there's tension between Mr. M and Mrs. M, a third party is brought in this case, the son, and the focus is placed on the son's abilities, the practicing soccer. We can even kind of see that he spends time enhancing his daughter's painting abilities, and this all serves as a way for him to kind of distract himself from the tension that he might have with his wife. Additionally, if his kids continue to do well both in soccer and in painting, his wife might be happier, and the hope might be for him that he can reduce some of the anxieties between he and his wife without addressing it directly. We see a little bit of emotional distance. It seems that because perhaps he's preoccupied with the fact that he's 35 and that was the same age that his father was when he died abruptly, he doesn't seem to want to engage in specific things with his wife. So they're going kind of separate ways. We see that they're stopping eating meals. He's sleeping on the downstairs couch. They are not connected very well, and they're not emotionally close. Something that we might want to take a look at for Mr. M is what his relationship was with his mom. She's not mentioned in the presenting summary, but this might be important for determining multi-generational processes. If we recognize that he had issues of separation with his mother, and of course we know that he lost his father at kind of a younger age, we might be able to better predict a pattern of parenting and place within the family unit for Mr. M. We understand that there might be a risk for emotional cutoff here. So it doesn't seem like they're in such a tense situation right now that Mr. M decides that he doesn't want to have anything to do with his wife because he is afraid of losing her. He's so emotionally connected to her. But we do see that if this pattern continues well past the children moving out of the house and moving on with their own lives, and it's just Mr. M and Mrs. M, they might become so tense that there's a situation where one of them decides that they want nothing to do with the other. And the last is how we evaluate his function in greater society. So we're not very sure how well his practice is as a science teacher for his children's elementary school, but if there's any indication that he's distancing himself from that craft, he's maybe not fully attentive, anything like that that indicates that there's an issue, we can kind of function in that concept of societal emotional process to see exactly how his function within his family might be affecting his function within society. I thank you again for joining part 1 and part 2 of Bowen's Family Systems Theory. Once again, my name is Nathan Villasenor, and I hope that you've learned something valuable here.